Hey, Joe, welcome to the show. Really appreciate you taking out the time to talk to me.
Well, thank you for having me, Abhay. Very excited to be here and speak to speak to a predominantly Indian audience, which is great. And thank you for the sterling work that you guys are doing to bring Bitcoin to India.
Excellent. Joe, can you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience? Yeah, just so that they have some context on you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, prior to a couple of weeks ago, you probably wouldn't have heard of me at all. But I released a video explaining, helping people understand what the problem is, called "What's the Problem," which has surpassed all my expectations in terms of the number of people who have watched it. I hoped somebody would watch it, and it turns out a lot of people have watched it and shared it with a lot of others. And so, you know, I'm very flattered that you reached out and asked us to have a conversation around it, Abhay. My background prior to this, I've been in Bitcoin since 2020. Um, Now, I wish I found out a lot earlier. My background, originally, I did physics at Oxford, and then I joined Goldman Sachs. I spent 10 years as an equity derivatives trader, all in the UK. Um, and also a bit of time at Morgan Stanley and UBS as well, at other investment banks. And then I started modelling sports, predominantly football, from a mathematical perspective to see if I could work out the probabilities of things happening in games. Um, Realised I was fairly good at doing that, and so left the city to go and move into sports. I started a quantitative engineering business with a partner, and we wrote algorithms and automated trading systems for pricing and sports for bookmakers. And then we were acquired, and we grew that business. We were acquired by another business, then played a small role in helping that business grow to to be a global business today. And as of 9 months ago, I took a step out of that business to after, I think, like a well-deserved break after a number of years, but in large part because I'd found Bitcoin, and there is nothing else worth working on than Bitcoin. Any time spent not trying to help Bitcoin eat the world as fast as possible, is a waste of my energy. And as a result of that, one of the things that's fallen out of this, and this is not my primary focus, but it's a piece of content that I created for some friends, which I think they really enjoyed and encouraged me to then make a video so I could share it with other people. Is sort of my, I guess, first active contribution to Bitcoin. And this is from an educational perspective, and my main focus will be on building Bitcoin businesses over the coming years to help Bitcoin inevitably eat the world. And so I hope the audience today, maybe they've already had a chance to watch this video before. If not, then we'll hopefully talk a little bit about it today, and there's plenty of time afterwards to go and watch it and then rewatch it and ask me any questions and share it with friends. And it's the idea behind it is that anybody can watch it, whether it's you if you've already bought Bitcoin, whether it's your grandmother who doesn't even know what Bitcoin is, or whether it's your teenager or your child who is just beginning to learn about the world. You don't need to know anything to watch it, but by going through it, it helps you understand what the real issue is that we face today at the heart of the financial system, but in a way that doesn't require any specialist knowledge. And so it's, I think people are seeing it as, increasingly an easy go-to as that very first touch point with Bitcoin. And I don't even mention Bitcoin until the very end. So you could send it to someone and they wouldn't even know, as long as, if they didn't see the title at the very top of the screen. But hopefully that frames it for people. And, happy to dig into it up here.
Yeah, I have watched this video a couple of times, and I think it's a very very good explanation. And to me, it came across as multiple books, kind of summary or synopsis of multiple books in the Bitcoin ecosystem, from Seth's book to Jeff's book, to all of that put together in a very easy consumable format. So before, without ado, let's jump into this. So can you take us through this slide of what's the problem, and explain to the audience of what do you want to communicate using this?
Yeah, you're controlling the screen here, Abhay.
Yes, I can control the screen, and please let me know whenever you want me to
Yeah,
get to the.
I would drag it forward to the first screen where we're looking at the list of problems that we all face today.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one here. Now, the world is a complex place, but everybody feels inside, to a greater or lesser extent, like things are not going in the right direction, regardless of what country you're in. Perhaps with the exception of El Salvador and perhaps Argentina these days, but most other places, possibly the US after the last 2 days. But that's very early days with the change. But we can sense a sort of corrosion of everything, whether it be our health or social stability, or it's our ability to save and protect ourselves and our families, and just a loss of trust in everything, in institutions, in all of these things. But we see them as all disconnected things, disconnected problems. But the reality is they're not. The primary cause of all of these things is simply the quality of our money. But because all of these issues are so far downstream of the corruption of our money, the fact that one drives the other is totally opaque to most people, because it goes through 2 or 3 different implications along the way. And so this video is, if you play it forward like 10 seconds, you'll see the big red button appear in the middle, and it's the quality of our money is the problem. And so, in order to explain this, I take the viewer on a journey through a story. And stories are great for engaging people and also helping them consume concepts without it being a lecture. And so, what happens is, if you want to move forward a little bit to them being on the island, there's a shipwreck. Yeah, here we go. There's a shipwreck of some, hundreds of smart people on a faraway island, and they're stranded and they have to start again. And the first thing they know where they need to get back to, because they've come from an advanced civilization, but they have nothing. And so the first thing they need to solve is, like, how are we going to trade with each other? Because we have to rebuild everything from scratch. And so they decide to use not just good money, but perfect money. And so if you can move on to the perfect money slide, please, Abhay. And, perfect money has these 7 characteristics, and it's, you don't worry too much about how they go and create this financial system, despite, living in ragged clothes and things on this island. But it's helping people understand what are the characteristics of perfect money, because we don't tend to think about it.
Yeah.
When I first gave this presentation to friends in person, I said, what are the 7 characteristics of perfect money? And I just had blank faces staring back at me, because money's just stuff you use. It's in your pocket, and I'll send it to you. But what makes it money? What makes it good money, or what makes it perfect money? And so, perfect money needs to be all of these things, and so they agree on this. And then there's an argument, then there's a disagreement, and 2 leaders emerge on the island. One, Satoshi on the left here, he says, well, this is perfect money, and by definition, like, why would we ever want to change that? Because it's perfect, and it's always going to be perfect. And on the other side, you've got Fiatello on the right-hand side, and he goes, well, yeah, I get that, but what if there's a problem? What if there's an emergency? Like, what if the people we put in charge of our money need to change it for some reason. Like, of course, they never will, but just in case, we should have the perfect money, but with a big red button attached that we can press. And no one will ever press it, obviously. No one will ever press it. But it'll be there, and we can press it if we want and change some of the aspects of this perfect money. And they can't reconcile this. They build a massive wall down the middle of the island, and it cuts off the trade and the communication between the two. And between the two sides. And then we get into how a free market works with perfect money, because both sides have perfect money because he hasn't pressed the big red button yet. And this slide is very much like, for the Bitcoiners listening, is the Jeff Booth's Price of Tomorrow, summarized in like 3 minutes. And, I would say a very poor summary given the quality of that book. So please go out and read that book. It's amazing. But it's the idea that in a free market with everybody acting in their own self-interest, you get a quality of life increase for everybody, because people are being as productive as they can because they tailor their efforts to the areas where they see the most reward. And the people that cannot compete fall away and go and focus on something else.
Yeah.
And so in a free market with perfect money, prices go down forever and quality goes up forever, which is exactly here. And so, which is very different from what we have today. And so the idea is, it's like, if you dropped humans on an island, this is what would happen. So the human nature, in the absence of a perversion or a corruption of the money, is a quality of life that gradually increases for everybody, regardless of whether you are productive or not, because the productivity of everybody increases the purchasing power of the money. So even if you are unable to work, for example, but you're able to hold on to your money, it buys more next week, it buys more next year than it does today, which is the polar opposite of the world we see today. You don't feel you can save your money today because you know it's
Can
going
you
to be
spend
worth.
a little more time, Joe, of explaining of why do you think that in the perfect money, even if I'm not productive to the society, but I have some money, how will I still benefit, and how everyone benefits from in this scenario?
Absolutely. If you could just move the slide on so it's all three boxes on the slide there, I think I can talk a little bit more through it. You got to have some fine control with your fingers on the YouTube there. Perfect. So maybe I'll just dig into this a little bit more. So when they first start on the island, nobody has anything, and so everyone's having to be self-sufficient. And so, you, Abhay, you'd be out fishing, you'd be cutting down trees to make your own firewood and build your own house, and then you'd have to build your own house. Like, you're going to be good at some of those things and terrible at others.
Yeah.
And so, despite having perfect money, nobody's really trading with each other because everyone's just about surviving. But what naturally happens in any society is, because people are better at doing some things than others, they focus on those things. They enjoy some things more than others, they focus on those things, and then they become better at them. And so when you have specialization, you see increases in productivity. People can produce more and of higher quality in less time. And, simple economics, if I can increase the supply of something, the price of it will go down. And at the same time as the quality of it is going up because I'm getting ever better at doing it. And so you then start to see active trading, because you may be spending all your time fishing. You can't build a house out of fish, so you need to sell some of the fish to buy the wood, and so now people have to trade with each other. And the next stage there is people have become more productive. They free up some of their time through becoming more productive to then spend more time thinking about innovation, or continuing to work more and taking the capital they raise to invest in their own processes or to invest in others to further improve their processes, etc., etc. And so inevitably in a free market, the quality goes up and the prices fall over time, forever. And so if you have a perfect money, what you tend to see is life gets cheaper. The price of tomorrow is lower than it is today. And it means the money's becoming more valuable. Just by holding your money, you accrue the benefit of productivity over time, even if you are not productive.
Yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
you're a grandmother who's sitting on savings, you're no longer able to work, and you're part of your family. Your money gives you hope and provides for you in the future. Right?
Yeah.
You're not
As
worried
Jeff
about the
says
money
that,
running out in 5 years because it's
yeah.
being eroded by all the inflation. You see the
Yeah.
opposite. You see the
Yeah,
opposite.
and this is so different from what's happening today, or what we experience, or what we take for granted today. And as Jeff says in his words, sometimes all 8 billion people in the service of all 8 billion people.
Exactly. You get the whole world working 24/7 to increase your purchasing power.
Yeah,
Who would not want that? Right?
yeah.
And that is the natural state. This is the natural state of the world
Yeah,
until
yeah, and
un,
so
un,
hard to believe when we live in this state that that is the natural state of the world, and it
yeah,
needs an intellectual leap to see the logic of why that is the natural state. That everyone is doing things in their self-interest, and as they're doing things in their self-interest, they are contributing to the society, and as they're contributing to the society, the entrepreneurs are reducing the price of just doing the same activity by creating more innovation, and that then helps everyone else.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And any human beings are human beings.
yeah,
And everybody cares about other people, but the rational thing for every human being is survival and making
yeah,
decisions for yourself and then helping others.
yeah,
And so any system, any natural system has to be built on human action. Any thought about economics has to be built on human action. Otherwise, it's fundamentally flawed. And you see what happens when you have a free market with perfect money and you allow people to operate as humans. You get the benefit accruing to everybody. And you can see here, this is what happens on both sides of the island, is that the purchasing power of the money increases every year, and it raises the standard of living for everybody, which is fantastic, until they elect a government, until the governments come along. And our governments, and yeah, you can skip slightly ahead here, Abhay, to the slide. Yeah, so that one, and slightly further until we've got Fiatello on there as well. And so both sides elect a government, and the government, however well run, it doesn't matter if it's left or right, big or small, whatever, it is apolitical. Every single government is like this. So it doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. We're all in this together. Right? Is it will hit a deficit at some point where the amount it's taking in taxes from the population is below the amount it's spending, and so it then needs to make a choice: either raise taxes, like any family does. When their income is below their expenditure, you need to make a change. Right? So you can either raise your taxes or reduce your spending, or a combination of the two. And on Satoshi's side, because he doesn't have any ability to change the money, he just has to make those decisions, and he has to raise the taxes or reduce the spending. Whereas Fiatello, he has the same choices, but the key difference is they're both up for re-election. And Fiatello knows that if he raises taxes or he reduces spending, it's going to cost him votes. And he
he has
says,
no
look,
malintent.
no
He
malintent.
just, yeah, yeah, there is no malintent, there's nothing. He just is saying, what are my logical choices?
Yes, yeah. And the fact that he has the choice is the problem. Satoshi doesn't have the choice. He loses the election. But Fiatello says, just this time I'll press the big red button. And then he prints that a little bit of extra money for the government, so he doesn't have to raise taxes, and he doesn't have to reduce spending, and he doesn't lose the vote. So Fiatello wins re-election, whereas Satoshi doesn't. And Satoshi's the size of his government falls because he reduces the spending, and a better financial equilibrium is reached because people realize there's no free money. like much like any person or any family or any company that's not connected to the government needs to balance their books and make sure that they're solvent. They haven't got access to the money printer. It means you've got to, that, I was going to say, that structure that everyone else in the world is subject to.
Yeah.
Satoshi is also subject to, and therefore, when things go wrong, there's a price to pay, and that's just life. But prices continue to fall, and quality increases. Whereas Fiatello, he says, well, that's great. This money printing business is amazing. There's no downside. I print the money. I get re-elected. No problem at all. And then I tell you what, Abhay, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through all of this slide, but perhaps if we can skip forward to having the whole slide on the screen, people will get a sense as to what unfolds through here. And this is really a journey through consequences in one slide. And what Fiatello does is he prints more money by hitting the big red button, which debases the currency. And debasing the currency has creates three main issues. And these three main issues then ripple across everything that we see in our society today. And so, the three issues are: he distorts all the price signals because he's injecting money into the economy that isn't real demand, and he's corrupting a free market with abnormal signals, which all the entrepreneurs start to react to, and then misallocate their time and misallocate the capital, which makes the economy more inefficient. Because he's printed money, the costs for businesses start to rise, the input costs, the energy, the human costs. And therefore, all the businesses now need to make decisions about how they continue to survive because they've got to make a profit. And it's because the government's pressed the money printer, it's increased their costs. Now they have to pass on the costs in some way just to survive. They're not being greedy. Yeah. It's just cause and effect.
Yeah,
and
they have to either shut their business, or if they have to run their business, they have to either reduce their cost by reducing the amount of money that they can pay to their suppliers or to their employees, or maybe by reducing the quality.
Exactly. So, they pass on the price increase, or they shrink the product. So you say that you pay the same price, and now it's smaller, but it's the same quality.
I've seen it so many times in the
supermarket. We all do. And this is, you'll think back, when you were a child, and like chocolate bars used to be so much bigger and so much cheaper. And, the confectionery companies be like, no, they're still the same size. It's just you're bigger. You're bigger now, and they seem smaller. And you're like, well, that doesn't feel right. Because it's not right. It's not right. They've been shrinking the products at the same time as increasing the prices. And it's two forms of inflation that we pay for as the customer. Or the third one is try to reduce the costs again by moving from the quality ingredients that you put into everything to lower quality ingredients, so you can keep the price the same for the customer.
And again, there's no malintent. You have to survive. You have to compete. You have to just be there. So you have these two choices. How much can you reduce? If you keep reducing the size, then people will go to shift to some other competitor's product because his or her product is of a bigger size. Then so you have a limit by which you can reduce the size, or you can reduce the pay of suppliers, because suppliers won't supply you at that, or pay of your employees because you won't find employees. So then you have necessarily got to reduce the quality of the product.
Absolutely. It's entirely rational, but it's not malintent. It's the natural consequences of distorting the quality of the money, right? They ripples downstream. And so by reducing the cost, they end up creating unemployment in the economy, because businesses now need to reduce the number of people working for them. But they also reduce the input quality, which then causes a health crisis. So now the food is full of lower quality ingredients, and we wonder why we're seeing, a growth in obesity and a growth in health issues across the spectrum. But all of these things then create more problems for the government to come in and try and solve, which means they've got to put more capital back into the market and misallocate it and distort the prices even further. And on the other side, you get reduced affordability, and that washes through families, and asset prices go up as the third impact of inflation. which means the asset holders, the people who own property or own shares and things, they see the benefit on paper, but families get left behind because now buying a house is more expensive. It's more expensive at the same time that your cost of living has gone up because of the passing on of inflation through the decisions of the business, but caused by the money printer. And you've got more leverage and more debt as well, and so it has impacts on the family. You now need both parents working. You spend less time with children. You can afford to have fewer children, and you start to see the breakdown of the nuclear family, and and a bunch of other ripples that we talk about on that slide. But it helps people connect back to that initial list of issues that we talked about to start with, where they all came from, very, very clearly where they all came from. Right? And there are other contributions to most of those, but they wouldn't be at the scale they are today without the money printer and governments having access to the big red button. And so, absolutely here, this sums it up. So, on two sides of the island, the people who have a Satoshi standard, the people using the perfect money, the whole world is working 24/7 to increase their purchasing power. Whereas on the Fiatello side, your money is stealing from you. You have to spend it. If you can't save it, the people on the Fiatello side of the island know that if they they keep the money themselves and don't spend it for 10 years, it's going to be worth a fraction of what it's worth today. So what's the logical thing to do? The logical thing to do is to spend it. It's to spend it. Why would you save it? Because you can't save it. So they start to see much greater levels of consumerism, much greater risk taking, because people have to speculate just to try and protect the value of their money. Because if you've got to take an extra risk just to protect the value that you had yesterday, which is totally nonsensical. You've already worked to earn the money. Why should you have to speculate to keep it? It's bonkers, absolutely bonkers. And then things go from
just
worse
on
to
that
even
point, I
worse.
think Seth says a very good point on there. He says that you have to earn your money twice. Because first you have to earn it by earning it, by doing the work to get the money, and then you have to earn it twice, which means finding all of those speculative activities, whether it's real estate, stock, or the next big financial thing, to just protect the purchasing power of it.
Absolutely. And we wonder why we see asset values going up, and we wonder why we see when asset values start to fall, or there's issues in the banking system, that the government and the central banks are falling over themselves to press the big red button again and just print more and more money, because they cannot allow these things to fall. They cannot allow these things to fall in value. But by doing so, you are stealing the wealth of the population through the back door. You're taxing them through the front door, and then you're stealing a big chunk of what remains every year through the back door. And people, we've reached a point, and certainly in the West, and you can tell me whether this is also true, prevailing view in India, Abhay, is that just inflation is a natural thing.
Yeah.
People think, it's just 2, 3, 5% inflation is just natural. That's just the way it is. It's like, no, it's not. This is deliberate. It is a deliberate policy.
Yeah, to the extent, Joe, today that a common man or my friends believe that inflation is good. It is good and it is helpful and helps society grow, and that's become the popular thinking, saying, there's inflation because we are growing and everything is supposed to increase in price, has become the normal. So it's so hard for anyone to say, because I was born with inflation, right? And maybe my parents were born with inflation. So I have no context of a world where there is, where this kind of a world outside of the Fiatello world that we've spoken about here.
Yeah, 100%. We live in this little epoch of time where no one has ever known any different. And we're told by central banks and governments that the target is 2% inflation, as if that's if that's a good economic decision. Targeting 2% inflation is saying we're going to steal 2% a year from you in your purchasing power. That's our target. But it's never framed like
So
that.
and it's never saying we will steal, and the moment it's framed like we will steal, so we will not even ask permission. We are proud of stealing at 2%, and if it goes to 3%, we'll reduce the stealing to 2%.
But we also know that when they say the target is 2%, they report the actual number as being 3%, but the real number is 10%.
Yeah.
Because they get to choose the measure, they get to choose what goes in the basket as to how they measure it, and they can take stuff out. And so it's one of those things. It's like 1984, like believe what we say, don't believe your own eyes type thing. We feel every time we go to the supermarket to buy food, it's not going up 2% a year. It's going up a lot more than 2% a year, and the quality is going down. Right? But you tell me it's 2% a year. Okay, I'm not sure I believe you, but if you keep saying it and it's parroted by the media, then we're. But there's no rationale.
If you say that it's increasing more than 2%, then you are the culprit. We saying CPI is 2%, so it's the right number. It's published by a very credible source, and if you feel that it's more, then there's something wrong in you. Either you're not working hard, or there's some problem in you. That's the framing as of now.
Yeah, or misinformation.
Or you are doing misinformation. You have ulterior motives to mislead the population.
Yeah, exactly. We're now increasingly in a world where if you go against what the government says, then you are providing misinformation. There's no room. There's less and less room to question the official narrative coming from the government on anything, and that's because they're in such a weak position because of the money. Because of the money, and it is. To come back to your point on inflation being a good thing, Abhay, inflation is just a terrible thing. Not only does it actively steal your purchasing power, it encourages you not to save.
Yeah.
It encourages you to speculate, encourages you to spend. Your decision making around investment and purchasing just becomes totally distorted. And the argument being that, it helps economies grow because it encourages people to spend. Yeah, it encourages people to spend, but not in the right way.
Yeah.
You want people to spend in a way that is productive.
Yeah.
If you spend all your money on going out and partying or going on holiday and things like that, that's not productive spending.
Yeah.
If you had a money which was accruing in value over time, you would be, and this is the mindset that you end up at by going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you view money differently. Yeah. Every time you spend money, it becomes much more of a critical decision about, do I really need this? Is this really going to improve the quality of my life or improve the degree to which I can be productive in the future by investing in a business or something like this? And it gives you much more of a rigorous framework for evaluating the decisions you make with money, which is totally missing in fiat. But when you end up with, if fiat was improving in purchasing power 2 or 3% every year, people would still invest. People would still buy. People would still lend. Yeah. You'd still buy food. You'd still buy clothes. You'd still go on holiday. But the relative assessment of the quality of those decisions would be more rigorous. Right? Yeah. And when you invested in businesses, you would invest in the highest quality businesses. You would not be speculating on lottery ticket investments. The quality of ideas, the quality of investment would go up in society on average. We would stop wasting capital on businesses that are never going to work. We would stop wasting capital on the most speculative things, of the things that don't contribute to society, which improves the efficiency for everybody in society. So, the argument that we need inflation to drive short-term growth or drive growth is a short-term view, not a long-term view. It's like getting fit. Okay, you run every day, right? After 3 months, you're going to be super fit, right? Whereas you run 10 miles every day, you're going to be super fit after 3 months. The guy next to you who's sprinting 1 mile every day laughs at you. I go so much faster than you. Right? You're not playing the same game. You know, after 2 miles, he's on his hands and knees, and you're running past him, and you do another 8 miles. This is exactly the difference between fiat short-termism, which requires a bailout when it goes wrong, or Bitcoin long-term thinking, where you have ever-increasing purchasing power and a total free market with no bailouts. It is like night and day. Sorry, I've gone off in a direction there rather than necessarily going through
No,
the
completely. I think
presentation.
that's super. I think it's
Yeah.
great. So, what is considered as normal? As said, inflation is normal. Spending is, and I remember a time when my parents would say, "Why are you spending on this? Why do you need another bag when your existing bag is all okay? It's not even having a cut or a tear or something." And I would justify it saying, "Oh, you are like a little old minded, and you are not modern, and I need it to look stylish and look good. It helps me become better and perform better and perceive better." All of those thoughts, which become logically correct, is all the source of it is something else, which I never realized till I fell into the Bitcoin rabbit hole.
Yeah, just buying your first Bitcoin. I mean, a bit, not a Bitcoin,
Yeah,
Satoshis. So in one Bitcoin, there's 100 million Satoshis, in the same way that in a dollar, there's 100 cents. And so, you can buy 1,000, well, slightly less now, 1,000 Satoshis for $1. And, you can buy even less than that, but just buying that first amount and just playing with it, like, it just triggers, it just, like, you've been through this.
yeah,
You get a tiny amount, and you start thinking about it, and then you start reading about it, and you start watching videos and listening to podcasts, and it's like this spiral. And it doesn't happen overnight; it takes years. But
yeah,
people talk about the proof of work. And the whole Bitcoin is, by its nature, the way the technology is rooted, strength lies in the proof of work. But that proof of work applies to all of us as well. Yeah,
yeah,
Bitcoin is that peaceful opt-out of the system, right? And it's going to eat the world. It's absolutely going to eat the world. It is unstoppable. It was just so early. We're just
yeah.
so
We just
early.
saw it. Yeah.
They're so early, and yeah, because people. I mean, you must have the same. People look, oh, it's $100,000 a Bitcoin. I've missed it. It's too.
Yeah, I missed it.
I
No,
missed
you
it.
must have made a lot of money because you've been talking about it, kind of. But I missed it.
Yeah,
Now it's for people like you to give your bags to someone else and cash out. Kind of. That's the normal thinking.
but it's so backward
It's
because
so yeah,
because and I would have thought the same. I did think the same thing, before going through Bitcoin. But the reality is, like, once you start going down the rabbit hole, your mind switches,
yeah,
right? And it's not. Bitcoin is the only asset in the world where, as the price goes up, the supply doesn't go up,
yeah,
right? Because the supply is fixed. But not only that,
yeah,
the people who already own it, they only want to buy more of it,
yeah,
right? Because it's going to consume the world. So why would I
yeah,
ever sell it?
yeah,
And that framework, just that way of thinking about supply and demand and markets, is just totally alien. Totally
yeah.
alien. There's just nothing in existence that is like that.
Yeah.
Um,
So your work has been super useful for me, and we run some Twitter spaces at our side, and we've talked about your work and how going through your work was, because as Bitcoiners we struggle of explaining why we are so passionate about Bitcoin and why we think it'll eat the world and change the world. But I want to thank you for this content, because this content was one of the easiest way of explaining what's the problem, and how did we get here? Because we all can, as you rightly mentioned, feel it, but we can't connect it. So this is what we spoke about on Twitter Spaces. Is when I reached out and say, yeah, we should have Joe and explain this to us. And also anecdotally, yesterday only, when I was setting it up, and I thought, oh, I have not sent this to my brother-in-law, and I've been trying to orange pill him for more than 3 years now. And then I today morning got a message from him. Oh, I went through this full video, and I want to talk to you. So I'm excited. I don't know whether what does he want to talk about? Yeah, no, but I'm excited. He's never sent me a message saying he wants to talk to me about this.
That's wonderful to hear, Abhay, and that's been one of just the best things about the number of messages and things from people is stories like that, because it's accessible to everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
And it gives, when you've watched the video, you understand why. And if you understand why, then you have a motivation for reading about Bitcoin or listening to
yeah,
a podcast or making a start. Like
yeah,
if someone just tells you about Bitcoin and you have no idea why it's even relevant, like, why would you spend the time? Why would you spend the time on it? You wouldn't.
yeah.
And so if we can get everyone to understand what's the problem,
Yeah,
then we can get everyone involved in what's the solution.
yeah, yeah. And as you were talking about the whole piece of human beings liking something and wanting to do more of it, and then specialization, that frame has also changed and become so distorted that instead of doing what I like, I kind of try and do something which will be very paying a lot of fiat in the fiat ecosystem, and that is itself so corrupted that I forget about what I like and want to put my energy in doing that, and I try and get to do something which gives me a lot of fiat, and that gets corrupted because that piece of financialization of all the products and financialization of the whole industry. Just as an example, I used to work for Citibank, and I used to get paid very well. But what is the real value that a financial institution offers in the upgradation of society? Is it same like anyone else who's producing good quality food, or is it less, or is it more? And why is an aspiration for a youngster to become an investment banker or some kind of a stockbroker so high? Because it just creates so much more fiat. It's the Cantillon effect, and closer to fiat,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
printer.
Well, precisely, and we have to be slightly careful because in a free market, it's not just doing the things that you like; it's getting that balance right. I think is
Yeah,
between doing the things that you are like and that you are good at and can
yeah,
give you the best ratio of input versus reward,
yeah,
right? And reward there can come in various forms, and it's not just purely economic. It's
yeah,
feeling like you are motivated, feeling like you have a purpose. And I
yeah,
think one of the most corrosive things that we experience using fiat or living in a fiat system is that purpose is undermined.
yeah,
Like we end up feeling like we are on a treadmill,
yeah,
like we are having to do things just to try and survive rather than finding the right place for ourselves where
yeah,
we have the alignment of economic incentives and purpose. Right? And when you have
yeah,
economic incentives aligned with your purpose, then you get some amazing outcomes.
yeah,
Right? Because you're motivated, you're more engaged, you're more innovative, you are more positive, and that goes to everybody that you touch. Right? And
yeah,
it's all your conversations, the way you carry yourself, it's the way that you think about the future, the way that you talk about the future to others. Like we've just lost all that. Lost all
yeah.
that. It's been eroded by the quality of the money.
Yeah. So, if Joe, I was, if any of our viewers who is a very successful person, and you yourself have been very successful in the fiat world, in the finance world, doing risk related, derivative related work. Let's say that a similar kind of a person is watching and saying, "I'm very successful. I have a decent house. My children go to good schools, and we have a good future, and I'm looking forward to buy my next car and maybe a second home." Why would that kind of a person, should that kind of a person be interested in Bitcoin? And if so, why?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, you should be interested in Bitcoin. Everybody needs to be interested in Bitcoin. Um, Bitcoin is a civilizational level change, like the internet. And think about how much your life has changed since before the internet to now. Right?
Yeah.
It's incomparable in a number of ways, and that's
Yeah,
lots
we
of
couldn't have had this conversation without the internet, right?
no, no, no,
Yeah.
no,
We
no.
would need to meet in a bar in London before we could even chat.
Oh, well, we can still do that. We can still do that, but next time. Next time. But but yeah, just think about how life has changed, but the amount of opportunity that has opened up. But also think about the people that didn't engage with the internet. Think about all those, just even in the quality of your own life. If you never engaged, or you were late to the internet, and you feel like you're left behind, or you're a business person and you said, "Oh, well, that internet's never going to work, is it?" And you know, imagine the strength of your business now versus whether you'd actually spent the time to think about it. We are at a similar point with Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is going to change the world in ways that the internet never did. In that, it's going to bake itself into absolutely everything, and every person, family, country, corporation is going to have Bitcoin, and they're going to want Bitcoin. They're going to prefer Bitcoin, and it's going to eat the world. It's absolutely going to eat the world. So if you think that from a wealth, well, there's two ways to think about this, and there's two aspects. And the first is wealth for you and your family. Now, everyone wants to plan for the future and protect their families in some way. And if you have savings, what are you really doing? No one feels like they can keep the money in cash. I certainly can't keep it in physical cash in
Yeah.
India, because the government decides to make sure it decides to decree it's no longer legal tender occasionally, right? So like nobody's. I may be out of line saying that, and I'm so, but you know what I mean. Like I know there have been instances where cash has been overnight,
Yeah.
or close to overnight, just declared in,
Yeah.
zero value.
Yeah.
So you have to keep your money sort of digitally, but you don't keep it in the bank because the amount of interest you can earn is less than the inflation, and so you're just
Yeah.
losing your purchasing power. So what do? You say, okay, well, we need to invest it. Okay, so what do you invest it in? Maybe buy some shares. There's probably only certain companies you're allowed to buy shares in. Probably Indian companies, and buying shares in foreign companies is maybe challenging,
Yeah.
right? Which then means that you've got to keep the value of those proceeds still trapped inside the rupee ecosystem, and maybe
Yeah.
less. You can't get dollar exposure, and so really, what are you doing there? You're really trying not to lose money, trying not to have the value of your investment eroded, because you're hoping the stock market goes up
Yeah.
enough to offset the money printing, right?
Yeah.
But you're also trusting the government not to destroy the currency or not to change the rules to mean that you can't. You are then taxed on the benefits of those things. Or maybe you think, well, actually, shares. I don't really own the shares. I'm investing on a stock brokerage platform, and they own the shares, and then there's multiple layers. So I'll buy a house instead. I'll buy a second house. Okay, but then you buy the house, and then there's taxes to buy the house. I don't know about the Indian tax system, so I'll talk
Yeah,
about it from
there
the
are
UK
taxes.
perspective.
It's the
Yeah.
same. It's the insurance and the tax and the and the local county tax and the and the property tax. It's all
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah, so taxes to buy the house, and then you've then got to pay property taxes every year to for the benefit of owning the house,
Yeah,
right? And then the government changes the rules to say, well, if you own a second house, now you've got to pay higher taxes, or
yeah,
we're going to reduce the tax benefits, or we're going to change the rules in such and such a way because people owning second houses is, help hurting people who don't own houses, pushing house prices up, even though that's a function of them pressing the big red button and printing money. And you go, okay, well, if I can't own houses, what am I going to own? Well, I should own something that's hard, like a limited supply. So I'll buy gold, right? And I know, gold is very big in India as well, and
yeah.
in jewelry and for
But
But what
not with the
happened?
younger folks. So anyone who's successful and present and saying they are not buying gold. They're saying gold is for the oldies and for the people who've not evolved to the new. Yeah. So they've lost the conversation and the context on hard money with gold.
Okay, well that's worrying if it's leaving hard money aside. It's less worrying if they're saying I'll just buy Bitcoin instead. But maybe they haven't made that leap yet. But
Yeah.
for those that are thinking about hard assets, the natural next step is gold
Yes.
or silver or gold. But then what do you do? Like you buy the gold, you can't be sure. How can you be sure that's real gold? How can you be
Yeah.
sure it's high quality gold and not something else? How do you then store it? How do you look after it? When you go to sell it, you're taking a haircut on selling it. You're selling it for less than it's worth. And then if you acquire enough of it, you're then worried about security. So what do? You say, well, I'm not going to hire someone to look after the gold. I'm going to go and find a gold vault and put my gold in the gold vault. And what's the vault going to do? The vault's going to give you a receipt for the gold, right? So what do you own? Well, you own a receipt, and maybe you own the gold if the vault says you can have it back, and if the government says you can have it back.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the same thing. So what do you truly own? And all of this is like the natural sequence of thinking about how you just protect your money. And when you go through this and you realize, actually, A, I can't protect myself against the debasement, and B, anything I choose to use to try and protect myself, I don't actually own. Only with the permission of the government do I own it, and the permission of other things under the government. You then say, well, hang on a minute. What is the solution? And the natural solution is Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin. It's instant, censorship resistant. Nobody can take it off you. And it's monetizing the entire world. It is just the natural end state of thinking through the challenges you find yourself in your day-to-day life, starting from wherever. Whether it's homelessness or the obesity crisis, whatever, all ends with Bitcoin. Because you identify what the problem is, and the problem is the money printer. And then you try and protect yourself, and you go through these mental leaps, mental leap, as you work through better and better solutions. But you can never solve it, right? Because it's so corrosive. And the only way to solve it is Bitcoin, because it's
Yeah.
outside the system. Nobody can control it. No one can take it off you. No one can tell you what to do with it. And you can carry it in your head. You can learn 12 words, put the 12 words into a story, right? 12 words into a story, carry it in your head, right? Nobody can take it off you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's perfect. It's perfect money, and it's going to eat the world. So, I hope we've come a long way from talking about the presentation, but I hope the audience at home, if you haven't had the urge or felt the motivation to spend some time reading about Bitcoin or learning about Bitcoin, that this helps nudge you in the right direction, because it will be the return on your time invested in learning about Bitcoin will be the highest return you'll ever have in your life. But you've just
Great.
got to invest that bit of time.
And then I am a CFO of a successful company, or a CEO of a successful company, or founder CEO, and of large family business. And there's a lot of treasury assets that I have. It could be government bonds, it could be cash on the balance sheet, and generally to ensure the share price, I'm doing a lot of buyback of shares, and using that cash because I don't see an opportunity to buy some or do some interesting acquisitions. If I am in that position, should I care about Bitcoin because it's some parallel small system, and will I, if I do care about Bitcoin or do a read about Bitcoin, what could be, should I, and why should I?
Yeah. Again, the answer is absolutely yes. You need to care about Bitcoin. And I think the answer is slightly different depending on the size of the organization and the type of organization. If you're a small family business, there's always a trade-off, and this is true of all businesses, but especially a small family business, is the trade-off between, you know, liquidity and planning for the future. Yeah. Because any business, you need to ensure that the business is there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. And so every business has cash flow issues from time to time. Some businesses are more cash generative than others. And what you should absolutely not do is just put all your reserves in Bitcoin. That would be a very imprudent thing to do. Not because necessarily it won't go up in price in the long run, but it's volatile. Yeah. It is volatile, and this is one of the things. But for Bitcoin, volatility is good. Like, we are trained in everyday life that volatility is bad. Right? It is.
And you've been a risk guy all your life, yeah. So you've been trained to think volatility is bad.
No. Well, I like volatility because it creates opportunity.
Yeah.
But in finance generally, and when for CFOs try to minimize volatility in their business.
Yes.
Right? They like predictability. Now, predictability is not necessarily aligned with maximizing shareholder returns. Okay, quite often they are completely misaligned. Right? A CFO doesn't get fired immediately for only growing at 10% a year. Yeah. Every year for 5 years. Right? What if you could grow at 25% a year? Yeah. Compounded, but some years it might be flat.
Yeah.
I'd still take that as a shareholder, but the risk profile for the CFO and their decision making is obviously very different. And so, you don't want to be risking your family business or any business subject to the vagaries of the Bitcoin price, because Bitcoin, it can only go down 100%, right? But it can go to infinity. And when you think about a risk reward, that's a pretty compelling risk reward. It's the only asset in the world with that risk reward. And it's less than 1% of its way to the monetization of everything in the world. And the governments are still pressing the big red button continuously. So the fiat comparison is ever growing. And so, if you're going to think about incorporating Bitcoin onto a balance sheet of some form as a company, it should be in, very measured, very small amount of excess capital, things that you are not going to need in the next 4 or 5 years, where you're thinking about making sure your business is there in 20 years' time, is there in 50 years' time, is there in 100 years' time for your descendants.
Yeah.
And just like we face an uphill battle in our daily lives to protect our wealth and wealth creation and storage of our wealth, businesses face the same. They're still subject to the erosion of the purchasing power. But they're also, as the chart we showed earlier, they're subject to this constant pressure in their cost of goods, which they have to pass on. And so they've got this constant balance to strike, which makes their job very hard. But if you can inject an asset into your balance sheet that sucks up a portion of your excess capital and then gives you the funds in 5 or 10 years to expand because that asset has grown. Right? It gives you a hedge against the governments. It gives you a hedge against the banking system as well, because if the bank cuts you off for whatever reason, if the government cuts you off for whatever reason, you've got Bitcoin. Pay your suppliers in Bitcoin. No one can stop you. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it should be on every balance sheet in the world. And as you go further up that size of corporation, you only have to look at the best performing company in the entire world last year to answer
Yeah.
the question, should we be looking at Bitcoin? Absolutely, should be looking at Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I mean, if those are
And
unfamiliar with MicroStrategy in the US, similarly, Google them after this, and they are buying Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin.
yeah.
They have tapped into the financing glitch that is the fiat system, and they
Yeah.
are the first of an increasing number, and it's going to end pretty much with everybody doing exactly the same thing through different structures
And
in every
let's say
part of the
I'm
country.
a politician, Joe, and I am a head of a county or a mayor of a city or a country, state, or for or for even for head of a state. Should I care about Bitcoin, and why should I care about Bitcoin? Why should I study Bitcoin?
We should certainly care about it from a personal capacity. Um, and the thing is, once you start from a personal capacity, it then in fact affects everything else. So if you're a Bitcoiner going to work, and especially if you work in the government or something like this, you then start to see the issues around yourself, right? And then you start to make different decisions because you start to see the world differently. But from
Yeah.
a government's perspective, Bitcoin is the only way out of the solvency crisis for them.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is the solution to the global debt crisis. It's the only way governments can recapitalize themselves. Like the gold, there isn't enough gold, but they can all buy Bitcoin, and you have game theory with Bitcoin. As soon as one country starts buying, and let's say I'll qualify that, countries are already buying, more and
Yeah.
more countries buying. But as soon as one or two key countries buy Bitcoin, it changes the rules for everybody.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. And every country could have different set of opportunities. One is someone could have capital and they could buy, but as Bhutan, which is a small neighbor hill state country of India, has shown that it could just use its natural resources to mine Bitcoin, and it's been silently mining Bitcoin and has $1 billion plus of Bitcoin, and
amazing.
it could become
Yeah,
one of the richest countries in the Southeast Asia region 10, 20, 30 years out.
Bhutan is going to become like the Monaco of
Okay.
Asia.
Yeah.
um, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, Bitcoin solves the energy crisis as well, Abhay.
Yeah.
And you know, many countries around the world are sitting on effectively infinite amount of renewable energy. Just nobody
Yeah.
taps into it. They haven't got the populace to make use of it. They haven't got the industrial capacity that requires that energy. But it's just the energy
Yeah.
is there. It's just going to waste. But all of this energy can be monetized to secure the Bitcoin network and to mine Bitcoin. And by doing so, so for example, if the more and more Bhutan builds out its mining infrastructure, the wealthier it becomes. Also, the greater level of electrification it can bring to all parts of the country where there is natural
Yeah.
resources, which increases their ability to build out an industrial base
Yeah.
and to provide growth in the economy, a higher quality of living for their population, and lower energy prices.
Yeah.
Lower energy prices because the value created from mining allows you to build out excess capacity in your energy grid and be the buyer of last resort at night when all the lights are off and no one's buying
Yeah.
the energy. The Bitcoin miners can be there, and when everyone puts the lights on in the morning, the Bitcoin miners switch off because the price goes up. And by doing that, it means that the payback time from investing in
Is
energy
reduced
infrastructure
tremendously.
shrinks dramatically. So you
Yeah,
can build more energy infrastructure and
yeah,
lower costs for the people using it. Like what's not to like? I mean,
yeah,
this Bitcoin solves the energy crisis, and so it blows my mind. And you must have the same reaction when you see on the news, oh, Bitcoin is destroying the planet, or Bitcoin
yeah,
energies. It's like you could not you could not be more wrong. I would love just to sit down with you for half an hour, and then you'd be like, "Oh my word, I'm really embarrassed I said that." But this is like the
yeah,
prevailing narrative. But this is how
yeah,
early we are. This is how early we
yeah.
are. So please read about Bitcoin, watch videos, listen to podcasts. Yeah, there is no better way to spend your time other than with the people you love.
This is great, Joe. Thank you so much for creating this content. What's the problem? I've loved it. All people that I've shared loved it. And is there any other thing that you would want to share with the audience? Any last few things, or any place that they can reach out to you?
Yeah, well, I'm on X at SatmoJoe, and the video itself lives at Sats versus Fiat. So don't worry so much about that. Just watch the video on YouTube, and then there's links below, and you can find the website. But
Yes.
there's extra resources. So once you've watched the video, if you then want to learn more about Bitcoin, come to the website satsversusfiat.com, and there's extra videos there via the Learn section for different aspects. So there's something there for everybody, and then you can start down the rabbit hole. Um, it's not a commercial exercise. This is something I've created, which I'm giving to everybody, and hoping people watch it and share it, and maybe even want to get involved. And so we've already translated it into 23 languages at this point after 2.5 weeks, and this is all through volunteers around the world. And so we have native subtitles, but we don't have Indian coverage at the moment
Oh,
in
okay.
any of the
Yeah.
languages. We have one in flight, but I know there are multiple languages spoken in India. So anybody who
Yes.
watches this and who is motivated to translate it into local languages, get in touch. Get in touch via the
Yeah.
website. I would love to add another 2, 3, 4, 5 local languages within India to make sure this gets in front of as many people as possible. So um, please get in touch. And yeah, it's been great having the conversation with you, Abhay. And so thank you very much for having me here.
No, thank you so much, Joe, for your time. Really appreciate you taking out the time and giving us the time and creating this for us. So you are the Satoshi for the day, helping people
Yeah, but
learn more about about
I thought
Bitcoin.
I,
So
I thought you were Satoshi.
we all are Satoshis.
Oh,
Once you start going down in the rabbit hole, you kind of the whole spirit of Satoshi bites or latches onto you, of saying how selflessly you try thinking about. Even if people don't understand it, it's okay to start doing what seems what in your mind is the right thing, and then finding that small baby step which as it grows can create value for everyone. So like Satoshi created Bitcoin and it's creating value for everyone, you've created this content, so you are Satoshi in this manner where everyone who sees or interacts with this content will benefit from it. So thank you so much.
well, that's very, very kind thing to say. So thank you, Abhay. And thank you to those at home for listening. And please give the video a try. And then if you enjoy
Okay,
it, share it with as many people as possible.
great.